The American Foundation for the Blind, AFB, has produced a film called Possibilities with open audio description. Bill Sarine is the filmmaker of this film. He's been featured in this podcast before, and this particular interview is so important on so many different levels. It was an honor to produce the audio description for this film in collaboration with Bill and AFB. His vision, his story, his sense of what audio description is all on the screen and in your ears. Our dear friend Kevin Thompson would be so proud. So for now, let's give a little tease of what this film is about and what he brings to it. And one more thing, we're so honored to have Bill on this podcast. But we weren't able to get a studio for this recording. There are some audio glitches, and hopefully you'll get used to it and listen to the content. Here we go. Welcome to the ADNA Presents. This is Roy Samuelson. Today we have Bill Sarine. He is a filmmaker and has recently completed the film Possibilities for AFB. Thanks for joining us, Bill.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
It's great to have you back. I'm thinking about audio description and what you love about it, and I'm wondering about your experience, particularly with this film and some of the initiatives and vision that you had incorporating audio description. Can we jump in with that?
I love that there's so much left to be done with audio description. I think we're still in the growth stages of it. I feel like everybody right now is doing some amazing stuff out there and really giving some deep thought to full sound experiences, incorporating score, where placement makes sense, casting decisions, all kinds of fun things that are just leading to better immersive experiences. And I think as a filmmaker, that's what it's all about. It's getting people to escape for a little while and really get drawn into whatever experience you're trying to create for them and have them walk away feeling something. That's the whole idea, is to evoke that feeling. Audio description is just coming along so far with different folks. And I obviously there's gonna be good and bad, but there's good and bad of everything, you know. So many people have been contributing in amazing ways that are really letting audiences find new joy and find new experiences through audio description in film.
One of the things we focus on in this podcast is the immersive experience, which you said, that experience itself can be part of the discrimination that happens with our AD audiences when it comes to film and TV. Let's pivot to be a little more specific in that immersiveness when it comes to that deep thought that goes into audio description and the growth that's happening. Can you name maybe some examples of what you went into with this particular film, Possibilities, as far as your intent in incorporating audio description from the beginning?
This was a bit of a unique experience because the intent was to create a film with open audio description. So creating some sort of parity in experience between sighted and non-sighted audiences and seeing how close we could get to that. I kept saying all along, I don't know if we're going to get it perfect. I think we're just going to do some stuff that's hopefully in the right direction, and other people are going to learn from that and do even better things. I think that's a fun attitude to have because it's a bit experimental. I think that's how good things happen sometimes, is by trying things out and seeing what works and seeing what doesn't. I think we went into that with that mindset thinking, oh, this would make sense. And it's AFB that's doing it, right? If anybody's going to try this, it should be AFB. Like, it's a shame, I think, that a lot of times filmmakers are not included in the AD process, but including a filmmaker in the AD process has its own bumps in the road too, and has its own pitfalls, because now you've got the same person making all the other decisions that's now making AD decisions. And that comes into a whole other level of collaboration and a level of back and forth that probably just hasn't happened much in the AD world at all. So I think that's an interesting way to come at it. I think we had a terrific team. We had a hybrid team of blind and sighted folks working on it. You know, we had a blind sound designer and a blind composer, and almost the entire AD team was blind, and several blind producers in this film. It's a community effort to create an experience, I think, that is more meaningful and more fun for everybody. And I'm really proud of what we did. I think we created a film here that's exciting. I mean, it's about lived experience in the blind community. And I think it's a little bit inward focused in terms of, like, it's not a narrative, it's not that, but there's no reason somebody can't learn from this and incorporate this process into a narrative as well. In this particular film, you know, there were just so many amazing, I'll call them gifts, that the cast was giving us in terms of sharing joys, challenges, all kinds of things from lived experience. And the goal of this film was really how do we honor their time and honor their commitment to being part of this and making sure that the messages that they were trying to give us were actually heard.
There is a story that you're sharing in this documentary. While it might not be a direct narrative, as you said, that you went into it with that right direction, with your focus on storytelling, being able to take these pieces of interviews and weave it together in a way that not only makes sense, but has that compelling, immersive feeling that you wanted to share with our audiences too. Can we talk a little bit about that on the story side and then also on the audio description side?
So on the story side, documentary is a weird thing because you go into it with a plan and you go into it with it's sort of like a made up narrative in your head. The way this is how I think it's going to plan out. And sometimes you're asking leading questions trying to get to that thing. Usually what emerges is something that partially resembles that. And then you wind up going down new paths because you truly want to be present when you're interviewing somebody, when you're talking to them, and you want to kind of go where they're going to a certain degree and really listen to what they have to say. And that's not always what you plan on talking about. And so what's fun is when you step back. I mean, we had over 30 people in this film, which is a lot for a documentary. When we step back, then we start to look at, are there some common themes that everybody's landing on? Some of which we had maybe planned on talking about and some of which we didn't. And how do we pick the most powerful moments across the board for each of those themes and let them come forward? And so that's a really fun process. We kind of broke it down. First of all, the whole film is framed through the lens of sort of like Helen Keller was an amazing person and really cut a wide path for people with disabilities. She was a very much a pioneer and really out there in front of a lot of things. But she's been gone for a while. And what impact has her legacy had? What have we done with her legacy? She was cutting this path. Are we still doing that? Are we still cutting the path? Would she be happy with where we're at today in terms of accessibility? Like, would she be happy with progress? And I think there's an argument to be made that she may or may not be happy with where we're at, because she never stopped at all. And so it was important in this not only to show a bunch of success stories, but also to show the other side of it, which is that sometimes it's not always working. And there are some real struggles going on right now. And it's not all about holding up the one or two people that made it, but also how do we focus on the folks that necessarily haven't made it and need help and need access and need to have that conversation pivot in their direction. And so I think that's pretty key. With closed audio description, if you will, it's often an afterthought, which is a shame. And it's sort of on the audio description team and others to try and figure out how to best capture what's going on, but within space that's given to them just by the way this movie's laid out. In this case, we said we're going to do an audio description, which sounds easy, but in a typical documentary, you're doing a lot of talking heads. You're interviewing a lot of people, and so what you typically do is you're going to slap B-roll over talking heads all day long. It's a great way to mask edits too. You get to mask audio edits and video edits and all kinds of things. If you're truly committed to open audio description, you can't do that anymore. So now you need to think about where you're putting B-roll and why you're putting it there. Where is the pause in this conversation? Where is B-roll truly going to be additive to the story as opposed to I'm just using it to cover over an edit, or I'm just using it because we're sick of looking at this person for a minute. It's been too long. Right? We're on this camera angle too long. It's boring. That's usually the reason to slap on some B-roll. Now B-roll had a whole different meaning to it. Now it had to be, how is this augmenting the story? At what point do we need context around this person's life outside of what we're hearing them say? At what point do we need context around what they're saying? If they're talking about a particular thing, do we need to show them with that thing, or do we not need to show them with that thing? Or is seeing a photo of them when they were a young child, is that important right now? Is it not important? It just turned into a whole different approach to really doing a documentary because that's not the way this is typically done. It became a bit of a puzzle to figure out.
With all those obstacles that I think you as a filmmaker having a deep understanding, just been, within all our conversations that we've had about AD over the years, that in doing this film, this is not the first film that you've had AD with, but I believe it's the first film that you've worked on with open AD, that with that it was something that was obviously foremost in your mind, especially because of the content and also because of the opportunity. It's really interesting to see how those decisions that happened, for example, you named is this the most important B-roll visual right now, knowing that audio description was going to be basically interrupting the flow of what the talking heads were, that those kinds of decisions almost made it like 3D chess meta. It made it incredibly challenging for your role. I'm wondering about one of the successes that you've had from this film, specifically in integrating AD, that you would want to be a part of in the future. Some a victory, a win that you got from this particular film when it came to AD.
A lot of filmmakers, I don't think they're thinking about AD as part of the film. It's like an accommodation for another audience. It's like localization. Filmmakers don't get involved in localization, and that's where you're basically, getting it ready for different countries. So they make it in whatever native language they make it in, and then there's a team on the distribution side that's localizing it for another country. And sometimes that even means changing the title of the movie for the poster and things like that because it doesn't translate well. But the filmmaker's not involved in that. But essentially, with subtitles or with most localization efforts, the goal is one for one. This is what happened in English or whatever language you did this in, and we want to try and accurately represent that as one for one as possible in this other language. That's not the case with AD. AD is basically a very subjective view of something that a filmmaker put a lot of deliberate effort into creating. So there's a reason why the camera was on the floor when they walked into the room, or was on the ceiling, or was in their pocket, or whatever. There's a reason why we're in dark shadows, or we're in bright light, or we're in slow mo, or whatever. There's a reason why all these choices are made on the filmmaking side, because it's part of that overall vision for how audiences are going to take the story in. And so AD, without the benefit of that input, is making decisions outside of that. I think they're doing an amazing job, but I think there is a disconnect there, and there's an opportunity for filmmakers to be more closely involved with that process, at least in terms of one thinking about, I think, placement overall. You know, is holding on that shot for another 2 seconds detrimental to a sighted audience, where it might give a blind audience a lot more room where we could have a more accurate and colorful description of what's going on there? That conversation, I just don't think is really happening enough or at all. And so therein, I think, lies the opportunity. I think it's really a matter of like thinking about all audiences when you're creating in the first place. And that's a bit of a uphill challenge, I think. But what the hell? Like, let's try it, you know? Because I think a filmmaker would never say, "Oh, go ahead and recolor that thing without my input," or go ahead and, "Oh, you don't like that dialogue there? Just yeah, you guys can just change whatever you want in post. Like you can change that out." That would totally not be cool. And so I think the same idea with audio description. They're not even aware that their story is now being told in a slightly different way than they ever intended for an entire audience. Let's try and bridge that gap. Let's open up that opportunity for more filmmakers and just have that conversation up front, just so they're aware, like, hey, not everybody is experiencing this film is doing it exactly the same way. I've said this before to other people. I don't think I'm a great director. I think I'm a better director than the last thing I directed. I think I just get better on each project. So if I didn't screw this up, hopefully they let me do another one. I mean, that's kind of the way I view career advancement is thanks for inviting me to the party. May I please do this again? This was really an enjoyable project. I can't say that about everything I've worked on. This really was enjoyable. AFB is a terrific organization in my experience, at least the experience that I have working with them on this film. They're like any group that sets out to do something. Although I really just want to say filmmaking is considered a visual medium by a lot of people. The idea that AFB said, let's make a movie, that's not what they're built to do, right? I mean, this is an organization that's a nonprofit, serving the blind and low vision community. That their mantra is not let's make films. That is not what they're set up to do at all. And to navigate that, even for people who do that for a living, is a tall hill to climb. And for them to take that on, it says two things to me. One, that's some serious dedication. But two, It's not like they're saying they're waiting for the world to come over and figure out where they are. They're saying, "We recognize everybody's watching movies. We're gonna come meet you." And I think that's cool. I think that's really cool. And I'd say part of the fun of this is blind and low vision folks are a subsect of the population as a whole. I don't know what that percentage is. I don't know if it's 10% or 7% or whatever that number is. But you can naturally assume that of the people that watch this movie, it could be a greater percentage are blind, but it might be the same thing, right? So 90% of the people that watch this movie might be sighted. However, we've kind of we've tricked them because the sighted audience is now going to experience audio description, whether they've ever experienced it before or not. And I think that awareness alone is kind of cool. You know, there's a lot of folks out there who don't even know what audio description is. They're not aware that that's a thing. I mean, I was ignorant of it 6 years ago or whatever. And I think it's kind of a fun way to physically show people, okay, this is audio description. This is what this is all about. I get it. I think that has a broader awareness effect, that just, oh, right, blind people watch movies, you know, because again, that's another preconception out there. Like blind people don't watch TV, they don't watch movies, they don't, this isn't for them. It was fun having to care about all audiences, because I not only did we spend a lot of time on audio description, but of course I spent time on color correction and all the things for a sighted audience too. So I think the sound mix and the audio description and things like that got extra love that they may have not on a traditional film. But then we want to do all the stuff we do in a film that isn't audio description forward, if you will, just so everybody's having a good experience. And I think that's the goal, right? Is to show that it doesn't have to be an either or situation. It can be a let's all have a better movie together.
What was your experience as a filmmaker when introduced to AD that said, I see the opportunity here? I see the creative, I see the end result, everything that you've covered in this interview. You had that vision. What was it about 6 years ago that was different than 6 years and a day ago?
I had heard from friends who are voice actors, including yourself, that you're doing audio description. And I don't think I even knew what that was when you said. But I hear audio description and I think, oh, okay, like you're reading audiobooks. Like I don't know what you're doing. And then and that's just like in passing. Hey, what are you up to lately? Oh, I'm doing this. Oh, cool. And then it leads to a bigger discussion when we got in 15 minutes to talk. And then I'm like, oh, okay, so you're doing this like for the blind community. I get it. Okay. That just gets me curious. But then there's that curiosity leads to, as I was talking about before, where I see that disconnect. Where as a filmmaker, you're thinking, wait, there's a whole audience out there that's being fed a version of this movie that I had no say in, because that doesn't connect. For better or for worse, I don't think it's an ego thing. I think it's if somebody doesn't have a solitary vision for a film, it's not a committee situation. You know, the editor could say to me, "This is the way I feel like we should cut this thing," and we're going to have that discussion. But at the end of the day, if I want to cut every other frame out of the movie, we're going to do it. Like whatever that thing is, and people can say that was the worst edited movie ever, and he could be like, "Yeah, that idiot is the one who said it." Like that's fine. Like, but if departments aren't outrunning themselves, I say to the customer, like, this is what I'm looking for. I'm trying to get this, this, this. They're going to bring you selections. You're going to have the final decision on that. You're going to make the decision how you want that to go. And that's how all the creative departments work together. And often you're brought things that are like, oh my God, you took what I said and just brought it to another level. That's so amazing. I wouldn't have even thought of that. That's great. And other times they're going to fight tooth and nail to keep this in, and you're like, that's just not. That's not going to make it in the movie. That's not the way this is going to go. And somebody has to be that tiebreaker at the end, and that's part of the job. But it's not really even a tiebreaker. It's like you're holding true to a vision you see for how this is going to turn out. In the case of audio description, when it's not open audio description, I feel like that entire conversation never even happens the way it would happen with every other department. And so this was a chance to have that discussion and for that to be just like every other department in the film. It's a tough position sometimes. I mean, directing is I mean, I enjoy it. I love it. If all you like doing is going to award ceremonies and sitting in a director's chair saying action, you should go get another job because that's only about 10% of the job. 90% of it is a whole lot of other stuff. I enjoy the job. I think it's fun. but I'm also aware that every single set that I'm on and every single edit session that I'm in, everyone in the room usually has their own way that they would do it instead of me. Someday when they're putting something in front of a producer and a producer says, I love you, I love your vision for this thing, I want you to go do this, cool, then that's their chance. Right now I'm sitting here in this chair and that's the job. So the job is to put my version of it out there. It's not even an ego thing, it's just like this is the best I could do putting something together. It was a shame to me that in that process audio description isn't included a lot in a lot of films. I'd love to see that change a little more. Even if there was a prep meeting just with the AD team and the director to get going on it, even if it was shot without intention, just a tone meeting and a tone discussion about this is what I'm trying to get out of this. And this is, if I was going to describe this, this is the tone I'd be using. And this is the pace I'd be using. And this is why. And this is the tension I'm trying to build. And don't over describe this maybe because I was going for silence and I'm going for space here. And I want that. And just have that discussion because I think having that input from the person whose entire vision of this film is, whether it's Batman or Little Miss Sunshine, whatever the whatever the thing is, I think there's so much that can be gained there. And it's all about plussing up the experience, right? It's all about making the best experience possible for everybody. I'm used to doing prep and tone and all kinds of meetings with every department. And I had never had that meeting with the audio description team before, but it seemed very natural to me that we would have a meeting like that because if you're part of the creative team, if you're a creative element in the movie, we're going to have that meeting. Like the same as I do with a production designer or, a DP or anybody. All of filmmaking is puzzle building. The scariest thing you ever say as a filmmaker is moving on because it means you've got what you need in that shot and you're ready to go to the next setup. It's terrifying. If you don't enjoy all those details, you shouldn't do the job. I love details. So I wrote tone notes for every single line of audio description in there. We went back and forth on verbiage and I mean, tons. We had really long discussions around every single word of the audio description script. That's huge stuff. But that to me is part of filmmaking, right? I mean, you have to be into the details. You've got to get into it. And the same as I was with color and with sound and with every other element of this thing. Audio description is no different. It's going to get a whole bunch of attention because it's a creative element. And at the end of the day, I think the one who's got the most lines in this movie is the audio description narrator. Like that's the largest voice in this film, especially with Open AD. I think for a sighted audience, like, oh, so and so's the lead, you know. But in this case, the audio description narrator has way more lines than anybody else, and that's important. I was happy that we did the casting process together and the script and everything else and the tone and all that just to make sure that the largest voice in the movie was on tone with the movie, like that we were selling the moments the way they need to be sold and we were describing things in a fun, entertaining way. Because to me, again, I always put myself forward as an entertainer. I think audio description as fact, I'm sure this is super controversial, but there's like facts and there's creative expression. But it's all these weird creative choices, right? And this is where somebody throws a paint bucket on a wall and says that's art, whatever. Like who's to say it's not? You're making decisions for every audience, sighted, not sighted, deaf, hearing, whatever. You're making decisions for all audiences in the hopes of giving them an experience. As a filmmaker, you're either hoping that they like that experience or maybe you're hoping that they hate it. And that's part of your art too. Like, I don't like art is subjective. The more important part is you're giving a thought. You're thinking about the audience, you're being intentional. You're actually saying that there is a desired effect here. There is something that I'm going for. And I hope it resonates with everybody that way.
When you think about sharing this film on the elevator, what's your pitch?
Shouldn't I have that nailed down by now? Shouldn't I already have that? I think it's a contemporary perspective on lived experience of blind and low vision individuals in the United States, sharing both joys and challenges and opportunities. I just have to say, like I've said this at the beginning, the true raw honesty that the participants of this film gave us is really something. I mean, it really is. The hardest part, obviously, is that the stuff that doesn't make it in the film. The stuff's on the cutting room floor. I mean, I love the idea of breaking down stereotypes, breaking down misperceptions. saying the awkward stuff, you know. The working title for this movie, because I needed like a North Star. I needed a working title before I had a title. And so I was like, I just need like a mission statement for this thing that's like, what are we doing? And after really going through all the footage, reading all the transcripts, really thinking about this thing, I said, there was a book in the 70s that was like everything you want to know about sex, but we're afraid to ask. You know, that was a very popular thing. And it was just like, it was demystifying a lot of the stuff, right? It was just like, let's talk about all the stuff that we don't talk about. So I said my working title for this movie was everything blind and low vision folks wanted you to know, but nobody bothered to ask. And so that was kind of like my North Star. That's a very clunky title, so we did not name it that. um, it also gave me a bit of a filter to put things through, because as you're looking at all the footage and you're going through all this stuff, you're kind of thinking, is it serving that mission? Is it serving that purpose? And if it wasn't, that's when it starts to step to the side. Or if we've already made the point and now we're just saying the point over and over again, we got to move on to the next point. You know, you got two people that kind of made the same point. Which one made it better? We're going to stay with that one. Let's go on to the next one. Because there's so many things to talk about. I mean, there's so many perspectives that are shared in here, work and home life and access. One of our producers, who's also blind, Lashana Cochliat, who's amazing. She introduced this idea of blind joy. And I was like, what's that? And her description of it is when one or more blind or two or more blind people get together and they kind of have this experience that only blind people have together. Because she's like, often we're in a room and I'm the blind person and everybody else is sighted. And she's like, so it's not always unique that there's a gathering of blind people. And it's not always just joy in the sense of like, oh, we're always laughing or something, but it's just shared experiences and shared camaraderie and all that. And so I was like, I think that's a section. you know, let's talk about that. Let's get into that. What cool things happen when blind people are working with other blind people and making moments together, I guess, or products.
I keep thinking we're in such good hands in this film. From the North Star overwritten title that carried you through to the team that you collaborated with, that you kept captaining, every single thing has pointed to we're in good hands. Super gratitude for you for taking the helm there and for all the decisions that you made to make this film what it is today. Is there anything else you'd love to share?
I don't know where this is going to get distribution, but it's going to get distribution. So we've already begun some good discussions on that. We're doing film festivals and we're doing all that right now. AFB wants everybody in the world to see this movie. They want as many people as possible to see it. Paying for it shouldn't be the gatekeeper in front of this thing. They're talking about writing a school curriculum around this. That's exciting. That's cool. But I also don't think this is the final word on anything. I want everybody to see this. I want everybody to say, that inspires me to do whatever that is. Go make a better version of the movie. I don't care. Go make a sequel. Go make your own version. Go make your own story. Take audio description to the next level. Use this as a stepping stone. Step right over it and go do something even cooler. Like, just, that's the intention. It's to open up conversations. It's to break down stereotypes. It's to break down awkwardness. Let's just talk about stuff. I encourage as many people as possible to see this and to use it in your own way. If you hate the movie, say, great, I'm going to go make, this is what it should have been, and go make that version. I won't be upset at all. I'll be the first one in line to buy tickets. But I hope that the film has done some good for the blind and low vision community, and I hope it's done some good for audio description as well, because audio description needs to continue to be brought more and more into the fold on the creative collaboration scale.
How can we follow you? Social media, websites?
My site is beachglassfilms.com. You can go check that out. There's a few things on there. I don't update it as much as I should. I'm Bill Sarine, Sarine, on Instagram, although all I post on Instagram are sunset pictures and ocean pictures. That's pretty much all I post. I have taken it upon myself over the past couple of years to become better with my image descriptions. Much like I put my own spin on everything, I really go deep into my image description. So if you're a blind or low vision person that uses alt text to check out image descriptions, read mine. I think maybe you'll enjoy them. I try, because I figure you're looking at a sunset. I don't just want to say it's the sun over the Pacific Ocean. I kind of want to go in and what's this mean to me and what's it like I really want to get as visual as I can with the thing, and get as descriptive as I can with the thing, and really call out the colors and the tones and the notes and this, that, and the other. Maybe that's a good thing, maybe not. I don't know, but that's the way I do mine. um, Hire me if you need something shot. You can always call me. I love working on cool projects with cool people. That's my vibe. That's my ethos.
Great. Thanks so much for joining us, Bill.
Thanks for having me, Roy.